the list is so long of all her various achievements in supporting and promoting women's sport. Not least the launch of a recent documentary called Game On, which I certainly found really inspiring. So thank you, Sue, so much for joining us. And Sue's just going to chat to us for 20 minutes or so about her journey in sport herself and her latest projects. And please do send in questions and in the Q&A box, use that, and Sue will be very happy to answer those. So thanks, Sue. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, lovely to be here. It's always a bit weird talking and not quite seeing people's faces too, but we're assuming that there are people there in the audience too. So yeah, thank you so much. I thought I'd just give 10 minutes or so, a bit of an overview of my career and how I've got to be doing what I'm doing at the moment, and then to kind of hone in on that activity. But I started off really in the world of sports PR. That was kind of my background. I studied sport and set up a PR agency back in '94, Promote PR, working very much in the area of fitness and women's sport and sport more generally, really, and ran that for 26 years. So working with lots of national governing bodies of sport, sporting brands and events and athletes too. And then in 2020, so around COVID time, I closed the agency for various reasons, but mainly because lots of the work we were doing at the time was around mass participation events, exhibitions, getting people into stadia. So lots of getting people into small spaces, and a lot of that business fell away. So we closed the agency, and then I launched Fearless Women to really focus on the space of women in sport and the work that I had been doing probably for the last decade or so within the women's sports space. It had really become a passion for me to help drive that change. I became a trustee of the Women's Sport Trust when it was founded in 2012, which I'm sure many of you all know is a small charity having a huge impact in terms of visibility and commercial viability of women's sport, and also raising the profile of female athletes. So I've been a trustee with the charity for a number of years, and everything was kind of coming together, and I felt there was a real opportunity in that women's sports space just to do more of the work that I loved and to hopefully drive some change. So I founded Fearless Women as an agency, and sitting underneath that, I wrote a book in 2020 called Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport, and that brought together a lot of the stories that I'd been gathering on my podcast, The Game Changers, which the first one of that was in 2019. So talking to trailblazing women in sport. So I gathered some amazing content, just talking to pioneers across women's sport, and decided I'd like to write a book. I didn't think there's not many female sports books out there. So a book that really looked at the history of why we'd got to where we are with women's sports and the inequality that exists, but a bit more of the understanding of why we are where we are and what that can do to impact what we might do in the future as well too. So I wrote that in 2020, and it went very well. It was nominated for a few awards and had really strong impact, which is great to see the influence it's having on beginning to help people both change their minds around women's sport, but also I think to arm women with the arguments and the tools to be able to counter some of those objections we've had historically around women's sport, as there's no audience for it and there's not enough funding and it's not as good as men's, etc. So that kind of worked from that point of view. And then as Fearless Women, a colleague and I, Kate Hannon, set up the Women's Sport Collective. So that's a network for women working across sport. And I know that some of you are members of that too, which is fantastic. So it's a free community for women that work in sport. And again, at the time when we set it up, I did have a few people saying, oh, why is it just women, and can male allies become a part of the collective too? But I think there's many more than enough networks for men across sport. And so for us, it was very much around gathering women together and there being a place for them to come together. We started online during COVID. That's how it started. So it's 3 years ago this week, actually. We had a pilot of around 70 women that we'd worked with across sport in all different roles, different levels of seniority. And we had a couple of sort of weekly online chats at the time that everyone was doing online chats during lockdown. And then that grew. And in the September, we launched it globally. And it's now got nearly 6,000 members across 85 countries, and we meet on a monthly basis. We have meetups, community calls. We had 60 on a call yesterday morning. And then we do webinars and we meet in person, and we have discounts and offers on events and things too. So that's really grown, and that's been a lovely thing to see flourish, and some fantastic anecdotal stories, but around the impact it's had for women, both in terms of finding jobs and maybe some of that confidence of coming back and knowing there are others in a similar position. And in terms of progressing, our real ambition for it is more gender equality in the sports industry. And I think it's a massive ambition, but hopefully we're playing a part there. So that continues to thrive. And Sky Sports have supported us for the last 2 years. So it's not for profit. It's completely free for anyone to join and take part in, but Sky cover our costs. So we're really grateful for them for doing that for the last 2 years. And then kind of having worked in that space and consulting to a few different organisations and so on, I had been in a documentary that was made a couple of years ago called No Woman, No Try, about women's rugby. And working with the team that were behind that, who actually had been my videographers when we were running the sports PR agency, Ben and Jack Studio, we decided to make a documentary of the book, to take the book and some of the learnings from the book and to create a documentary about that. So that's the most exciting project I've been involved with the last couple of months or so. We self-funded that, which might be some of the questions that come up from here, but it was we decided to make a documentary. We took it out to all of the usual broadcasters you might anticipate to see if anyone would commission it. And if you look across women's sports documentaries aren't really a thing at the moment. If you look across sports documentaries, I love sports documentaries, but generally it's male sport, Last Chance, Last Chance U, Drive to Survive, etc. Lots of male sport in those documentaries, not much celebrating female athletes. So we really wanted to change that, but no one wanted to commission it. So we went ahead and made it anyway. It was self-funded. And then when it was finished, I'm delighted to say that Netflix took it, which has been brilliant, because that's kind of the audience we always wanted, really, was to try and reach an audience that perhaps hadn't seen much women's sport in the past, or didn't really understand the barriers that female athletes and women's sport had faced. So it's been hugely successful. It's only been out for a couple of weeks on Netflix, but we've had an amazing response to it, which is great. And we're looking to do more female sports content now, off filming something tomorrow, but we're just beginning to look at what else we might do there. And I hope it will also encourage other people, production companies, etc., to do more in that women's sports space too, when they see the success that's there. So that's, I guess, me at the moment, is driving the Women's Sport Collective. The podcast continues on. So we're now in series 14, I think, of the podcast, talking to athletes and administrators and coaches and broadcasters, so women from across sport, about their careers and their journeys and what they've learned along the way. And we tackle some of the big issues around inequality in sport and society more broadly. So that continues to be really popular. The last series 13, I actually recorded the book in audio. So each of the chapters is one of the episodes on the podcast. It's completely free. So anybody who doesn't want to read the book or doesn't have time to read the book, all the chapters are there to listen to for free on the Game Changers. And I'm trying to encourage people just to dip in and listen to a chapter if they want to. You don't have to read the book cover to cover or listen to all 18 chapters. But again, that's been a great way to try and get some of that messaging around women's sport and why it's been held back, and why progress has been slow in some areas, but what needs to change out to a broader audience. I'm really pleased that we've been able to do that through the podcast too. So that's, I guess, it's a whistle-stop summary of my career, but it's very much around, I think, what I can do to amplify the voices of other women that are in sport. I think the rationale for my starting the Game Changers podcast in the first place was that there were so many brilliant women working across sport in all different areas. Not, there are amazing female athletes too, but not just the athletes, actually the women that fought so hard as administrators and coaches and broadcasters and all those places, but helping them to have a place to tell their stories and to shine a light on the work they're doing, and how that might then inspire other women in sport in the future to know there's opportunities for them in sport too. So I guess that was where it all started, almost, with the Game Changers podcast in 2019. We did 5 series with Barclays, looking specifically at women in football, fearless women in football. And then I say we're now in series 14. So I think yesterday we released a podcast with Molly McCann, the UFC fighter. Ailish McColgan is next week. So yeah, we're in the middle of that series now. So my plan is that will continue in the future. I love making the game changes, and it's really popular, so we'll keep doing that. Then perhaps another book in the future, and more work definitely in making more women's sport content. I think it's a really exciting time for women's sport in terms of the growth of the coverage and visibility and the funding. So anything more I can do to kind of amplify and drive that, I'd like to be involved in. So I don't know that is 20 minutes, maybe 15, but I'd love to take some questions from people if they have them. I don't know whether I can just look in the chat function, or if anyone's got any questions.
I can read them out to you if you want to.
Yeah, lovely. I've got one there.
Oh yes. How has the documentary been received so far, and have you discovered more stories about women in sport?
So it has been really well received. I've been quite emotional, actually. It's a funny thing, isn't it, when you make anything? It's like when I wrote the book, you had that doubt. So I wrote it and I thought, yeah, it's okay. And it's 86,000 words and I was quite happy. But I think there's almost, with all things, isn't there, probably as you create things, there's that self-doubt of actually, how will it land? What will people really think when it's out there? And the book's a bit different because you put the book out there and then people buy it, but not everyone reads a book in a day, or that, people buy it and then it sits around, or they buy it and they read it in a few months' time. So you don't really get that feedback in the way that you do with the documentaries. The documentary was out on the Monday, and then just the feedback I've had from people, and especially I guess feedback from women that have been really emotional about how they feel it's their story being told, and it mirrors a lot of the issues that challenges they faced in sport, and maybe the misogyny and the sexism, and that no one's really heard it before, but actually seeing it in a 1-hour documentary on Netflix has made people think, oh, this is so true, this is what I've experienced. And some amazing messages from men, and often fathers of daughters, but who have said, it just completely changed their attitude. It's changed. They're going to watch more women's sport. They're going to encourage more, play their part. So yeah, that's been really encouraging too. So I think the emotion around it, and it is that thing of like I'm kind of director and producer of it, and it's actually Jack Tompkins is the amazing editor who's cut it all together. But I've watched it so much over last year. I've watched it so many times. You get to the point of thinking, is it really any good at all? Or actually, I'm just too close to it. And because I'm in it, so the original plan was that we would just film other people and I would be the voice of it. But actually, I'm in it too. My family are in it. And then it almost becomes too personal of like, oh, I can't look at it objectively because it's got my daughters in it and it's got my... So it was harder. So it has been really lovely. I'm in a bit of a bubble of just real positivity about it at the moment. And I know that there will be negative people that don't agree with stuff that's in it and so on, and I haven't really had that yet, so I know it's coming. I'm bracing myself for when I get some negative feedback, but at the moment it has been incredibly popular and positive. And in terms of other stories, I guess it's just so many other stories, and this is a bit of what do we do next. Do we do specific women's stories, as in specific athletes? Do we do specific sports? Do we look at topics that are out there? I think there's so much to go at. And the issue for some of the broadcasters in the beginning is they only really want it if it's a name. You need to have somebody that's a household name in order to tell their story in their sport. And the problem for women's sport is we're not household names because they haven't had that publicity in the past to be that well known. So it's almost that chicken and egg until you give them the profile and the oxygen of the being seen by people, then they won't become names. So that is a bit of a challenge that's faced. But yeah, so many other stories and so many other angles to explore. So it's almost just deciding what works. There's the stuff that I want to do because I'm passionate about it and I want to tell their stories, that sits alongside what's commercially viable that someone might cover our time to pay for. And then alongside that, what would the broadcasters want? Because there's no point in making it if it just sits on a laptop and no one sees it. So what's the bit that's going to have the broadcast? So the Netflix bit, we could have made a beautiful documentary. It could have just sat on YouTube. Netflix is the bit that's made the difference because all of a sudden it's getting in front of people that may never even have thought about sport, women's sport. That was a long answer to that one question, wasn't it?
It was great. Yeah, I certainly found it emotional, kind of eye-opening, inspiring to watch, because I think the Women in Racing Committee, I suppose, we're thinking and talking about this all the time, that it's a little bit like you said, you kind of you get used to kind of having our network and feeling really passionate about it, but then seeing your perspective on other sports, seeing your daughter and your family involved in kind of the documentary was, yeah, I suppose it just kind of opened my eyes to the wider sport picture beyond just racing. So yeah, certainly fascinating watch for me. I've got a couple more questions coming in here. What can we do that can help promote women and sport and raising awareness on a daily basis? Women in sport, maybe.
Yeah, I guess it is for me, it's like calling it out and it not being acceptable. I think that with a book, I almost wrote the book was like, it's going to be a rallying cry to women to come together and call out the inequalities. And I didn't really think the documentary would do that, but it feels like it has done that. And for me, that's a really key thing. I think sometimes I look at the cricket report last week, the ICES, anyway, the independent inquiry, they're holding a mirror up to cricket. And the fact that it put the issue of sexism and gender disparity in cricket right up there with racism and with classism, for me, that's so important, because I feel sometimes maybe we should be outraged that there isn't the funding and the opportunity and whatever for women across sport, but we kind of accept it because it's always been that way, and that's tradition, and that's because in your sport, the trainers, the owners, it's almost been that way, and therefore we've got to fight so hard. So what I loved about, it's quite momentous thing, that report, the cricket report, but the independent report, but actually the fact that it said no, this is completely unacceptable, they should be paid the same, and they should have the same opportunities, and they should have the same pathways. And I hope that the documentary and what we can all do in terms of that question of what we can do is we can say, no, that's not acceptable. It's not right that only 4% of newspaper coverage covers women's sport. It's just not, it's not fair, but also it's just not right. It's not commercially right. It's not right for society. We're half the population. We've got buying power, all those things. So hopefully, I think what everyone can do is play a part in whatever sport they are in, whatever position, just not to accept it and not to be finger wagging, this is not right. But I do think together and with others coming on board and influencers, etc., we can helpfully shift that by saying it's not acceptable. But I think for so long we've gone, and actually I said that in the documentary, didn't I? I was at Loughborough when I was growing up. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's just the way it is. We don't get the chance to do that. We don't have opportunity. That's because we're women. But actually that's not right. And I think that's really exciting that we're at a time when especially younger people too are saying, no, that's not right and appropriate. So therefore we need to come together to help make that change happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're lucky in many ways in racing because women do compete on equal terms to men. But that said, in the same sort of breath, women, perhaps by the numbers, when you look at the statistics, there are a lot less women jockeys. It is more difficult to succeed. Female jockeys tell us that they need more opportunities. And there is perhaps still that bias existing there about selecting kind of female jockeys over male jockeys. So even there's some really interesting research that's been done by Vanessa Cashmore around how the betting public view female jockeys. And because they underestimate female jockeys, you can actually find value in backing female jockeys if you're betting, which that kind of in a very subtle way perhaps shows what female jockeys are up against. But we've got some amazing, we'll hear from Jo Mason later on this AGM, and she's a brilliant example, but we've got some amazing female jockeys that are showing that they can beat and compete on equal terms and have amazingly successful careers. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. On to the next question. What do you feel are the main challenges facing women's sport today? Perhaps covered some of those already, but where would you like to see significant changes in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think we've moved on dramatically in terms of visibility. So the visibility's got better, broadcast visibility definitely. And the problem is that, most of what people are watching is women's football. Not a problem, but that's 75% of where we're getting new viewers. So that's good, but it's almost what it does. For me, it's about across all of women's sports. So whether that is all the team sports, but other sports like your sport too. So almost where that shift needs to continue. So I think That's improving. The sponsorship is definitely improving. So new sponsors coming to women's sport that hadn't been sponsors at all before, never mind in men's sport also. And fans, the fact that we're seeing sell-out stadia, 60,000 at Twickenham to watch Six Nations, you know, that people are coming. So all that talk of there's no audience for it. Funnily enough, there is an audience for it. So I think we've almost not gone past that, but we've moved that on a lot. I think it is around leadership, it's around senior women around, and not just on boards, but around decision make, you know, around in those rooms, making decisions about the future of sport and how inclusive sport is. I think that's really, really important. And I do a lot of work in team sport. So a lot of my stuff is within rugby, cricket, netball, because those are ones, I guess, rugby, cricket, football, that haven't had that opportunity in the past. But getting more women, enabling more women to be in those positions to make decisions, that's going to make a huge difference. I think women's coaching and training is something that's often not overlooked, but I think that's so important, of how we can do all this stuff up here in terms of profile and elite sport and funding and visibility and broadcast rights, but where are the girls coming into sport? And actually, do we need more women to facilitate that in coaching roles, both at elite coaching, but also right through to grassroots too? So I think that's a really important one too. We're getting better with the data and insight around women's sport, and the Women's Sport Trust have done a huge amount in that space. So who are the fans of women's sport? Where are they coming from? What do they want? Does women's sport doesn't need to mirror men's sport? It can be different in the way, and you know, and you've said it in terms of racing, it is very much the same, but actually for many sports, it doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to have the same sponsors. It doesn't have to have the same audience. And so in a way, you have huge advantages of being tied into a men's sport, but in a way there's a disadvantage. You can't kind of reinvent yourself and say, we're going to have this race meeting over here that's just female jockeys, and it's got different audience to it, it's got different sponsors and broadcasters and everything too. So I do think there's a chance to innovate with women's sport too. So I think it's really exciting time, but probably investment is people actually recognizing it's going to take money to drive change. It's not enough to think it will just keep drifting in this way. It does take funding, and the people making decisions, I think, is probably for me the key part.
Absolutely. And a few people kind of picking up in the questions on, you know, women competing on equal terms. How do we make more of this? And then and actually there's a really interesting one down below. Do you have advice on how we in racing discuss this topic, given that our female athletes don't always like gender to be considered? They like to just be seen as jockeys. I think that's a real interesting one, if you wouldn't mind kind of exploring. I don't know if that's you've seen.
I think it's really hard, isn't it? I think that is really hard, and it's hard in a sport where, because there are a few sports where you are competing alongside men. I think, you know, and I guess even in sports like triathlon, where women are competing at the same distance, same way, but they're not competing alongside men. So you are not unique, but one of very few in terms of that space, therefore you wouldn't want to be classed as the female jockey. But it's quite unique that you are also in that place. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't want to talk anecdotally. I've been at a few conferences recently where I've spoken to women in racing, younger women perhaps, coming through whatever, and hearing of the just some horrible tales really of the misogyny in the yard and I guess I sit across sports, so I hear things in, you know, people share stuff with me and you comparing to different sports too, but that's been a bit of an eye-opener for me. And I guess how amazing that female jockey, as I've done it myself, women riding in this sport are, but what they've had to, how much harder they had to work, because they've had to overcome that to even get to where they are, you know, and get the funding and the support and everything too. So I don't really have an answer for not being classed as, because a bit of it is you want to celebrate that you are too, but you know, it's often not a black and white, is it? That I can understand the ultimate goal is you're just not just a jockey, but you are a jockey, and gender isn't a consideration there. But I think for where you are at the moment, and I understand then the sport almost really wants to celebrate and say how amazing these female jockeys are, which is a good thing, but does it detract from the fact that there's an awful lot of stuff that I believe, from what I hear, that needs to be sorted out within the whole ecosystem of racing in terms of gender equality? It's probably I'll sit on your AGM and hear what else you're saying, but I guess I'm saying I feel I can say that as an outsider to the sport, but that's kind of what I hear. So whilst it's fantastic that they're celebrated, but actually I don't want that to detract from the fact that then we ignore. It's a bit that gaslighting thing again. It's like, oh, we're doing so well, we've got these amazing women, but actually let's sort out the day-to-day and what's coming through in the future and how accessible the sport is for all women to work in as well as to compete in.
Yeah, and there certainly are challenges, but then we'll actually hear towards the end of this AGM from Emma Hamilton, who I think you met recently, Sue, who's doing a really interesting PhD on kind of analysing jockey performance, and a big part of that is female jockey performance. So hopefully there'll be kind of learnings there and extra support in place
and
to support.
Yeah. So there's a huge opportunity. This is the thing I think about jockeys. There's a huge opportunity because of all the benefits that, you know, in terms of strength to weight. So actually, if female jockeys have that opportunity and then can come out and be brilliant, you know, so in terms of countering people's attitudes too, there's a huge potential for racing to have a great impact. And for me, it's always about, it's not about sport. I want women to be equally paid and funded and have the same visibility. But for me, it's about what it says to society. So what it says to all those race goers, all those men that are there, you know, when men are there and watching, when they see amazing women having success and crossing the finish line first, I mean, actually, how does it impact how they feel about women in their lives, around their daughters and the opportunities and their colleagues and so on. So for me, it's always the bigger piece of what the success of female athletes and women's sport says more broadly in society. And I think racing has a huge potential to impact that. So it's really exciting.
And I think maybe we've got time for one more question. There are loads more, so I don't know how we're going to choose quite. We've got one here. How do you feel about Wimbledon allowing women to wear coloured undershorts for the first time this year? Do you think this should be considered for female jockeys in racing, given that they wear white breeches?
It's a really interesting point. I've got lots of thoughts on this, as you'll know from the documentary a bit of. So a bit of me is, I think it's kind of a good move that Wimbledon did make that change. However, I've only seen one tennis player wearing dark shorts, because there's a bit of the whole stigma then, oh, you wear white shorts, oh, you're having your period, or you're making a statement. So I was interested if even one has. I thought none of them might do. So yes, I think it's a good thing, but it's probably not even needs to be a white undershorts. It needs to be white skirts, because if you're at a period, if you sit down and if you were leaking, actually the white undershorts wouldn't make that much difference. But since I've had those opinions, someone did mention recently, the bigger issue is our attitude towards menstrual blood, that it actually isn't even about I completely understand that women and girls don't want to play and compete in whites, and I think that's a good thing that Wimbledon have done that. At least they're falling in line at last with many other sports, and obviously football's done the same, and rugby players and so on. But actually the issue is that we have an issue, we as society in the world, have an issue with menstrual blood, because actually if it was men's nosebleeds, or it was sweat showing, other bodily fluids, we wouldn't have such an issue. It's because there is this horror of the fact that it's menstrual blood. So someone pointed that out to me, is that actually that isn't the issue isn't the whites, the issue is the attitudes. But however long it's going to take to change those attitudes in society, actually changing out of white shorts and skirts and so on for right now in 2023 could make a huge difference to stop girls dropping out of sport or wanting to compete in sport. So yeah, I think it's a really important move.
Thank you.
See, I could talk for hours on all of these.
I know, and there's so many of these questions that I really want to ask you as well. There's a good one from Zoe about do coaches appreciate kind of the gender differences when they're training, science-based approaches. Is there enough investment in nutrition and the effect of menstrual cycle and menopause in sport? I think the answer is probably no, isn't it?
Absolutely not. And I think if you look at all the work at HQ, and I'm talking to and sports scientists this afternoon actually after this, but that holds whatever 6% of research done on women's bodies in terms of sports science research. So absolutely not. But I guess what excites me is we're having that conversation now. We're having the conversation about ACLs, about concussions, around menstruation, around all those things, motherhood. I'm filming tomorrow with a pregnant rugby player who's hoping to come back and play in the PWR later this year. So the fact is, we're in a time when we are having those conversations, and also I love that there's like a domino effect of we're having a conversation here about white shorts or about research or about science, and then we'll have it in football, and then it will come into cricket, and then it goes. So that's really exciting for me, that we are right in a time of change, and everybody on this call, everybody in sport has a chance to help amplify that, to ask those questions, and then to take the findings and to stimulate conversations elsewhere. So no, there's nowhere near enough research but at least now we're having the conversation to call it out, where we may not have even been there 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And it's great that you mentioned parenthood, because we have a whole section coming up in the AGM about our programme called Racing Home, which is all about making working parents' lives easier, whatever role they're in racing. So thank you so much, Sue. I feel like we could have had a 2-hour webinar just speaking to you and asking you questions, but I think we better leave it there and get going with the AGM for now.
Thank you. Do share my details. Sorry, so do share my details. I'm happy to answer questions or connect with people, and yeah, join the collective, all those things. So do connect with me from here, is what I would say.
I'll send out lots of links and contacts when I send out the recording for this webinar, because I'm conscious quite a few people won't be watching it live. So yeah, thanks so much, and we'll move on to the AGM. I'll just share my PowerPoint screen, so bear with me if I can find it. Okay. Right, hopefully everyone can see that. So I will introduce the committee as we go along as well, because they'll be speaking about their respective areas. But yeah, thank you so much to kind of everyone for joining and tuning in to hear all our updates. As you can see from the agenda, we've got a few things to get through, but it shouldn't take too long. We have got a few committee updates that we want to share with you that we're excited about. So this is our commitment to our members, which is just our kind of year in, year out aims, which I'm pleased to say Women in Racing is over 10 years old, so this has been consistently delivered throughout its time, and the same goes for the previous year that we've just ended. So that covers 4 events a year to support career development and networking amongst our members, our mentoring program, developing lots of new partnerships each year, our bursary program, which we raise funds for, but we also give out those bursaries to support women in the industry to develop themselves and yeah, invest in their own training and future, I guess. Our membership, we work to grow that each year. You'll hear more about that shortly, and continue to raise awareness around the issues of female representation in racing, which we've certainly been busy doing this year, and you'll hear more about that, particularly with Racing Home shortly. In terms of committee updates, so sadly for us, but very excitingly for Olivia, she has got an amazing job. It's probably fair to say her dream job over in Australia, and she flew out last week. So we wish her the best of luck with that. She'll be working for racing.com, but it does sadly mean that she's no longer going to be helping us and running our social media for women in racing. And then during the course of the past year, we've got the following new appointments. So Ashburn, who works for the BHA in safeguarding, Ashley Witchard, who I know lots of you will know from her success in the Magnolia Cup, Blorheen Murphy, who is trainee general manager for the Jockey Club racecourses, Emma Sayer, Scottish Racing Academy, Faye, who works for Carisbrook Stud, and Flora, who works for ITV, who's kindly a very recent joiner to the committee and is going to help us with our social media. And you'll hear from many of those different committee members shortly. So that is the current committee. And now is probably a great time for me to say a massive thank you to them for all of the time, energy, effort that they put into women in racing, completely voluntarily, just to support women and equality in the sport through our various different programs and day to day. So membership. So Blorhy normally covers this, but she is currently working at the July Festival, which is an extremely busy week. So yeah, I'll just cover this for her briefly. So our total membership is 185. We're building that back up post COVID. It is an increase on last year, which is a real positive. We've got a few gremlins is probably the easiest way of putting it in our membership system. So we'll soon be launching a new membership system. So if you've had issues with your membership, because I know a lot of people have, I've had a lot of emails about it through our website, don't worry, we'll be relaunching it, putting it back out to all of those members that have lapsed for gremlin type issues. So within your membership, you have discounted access to our events, you have online resources and discounts, free access to the Women in Racing mentoring program, free access to apply for the bursary, and their job roles and things advertised regularly on the website. So you can kind of log in to access all of those. So I'd encourage you to do that if you're a member, or if you're not a member, then please do join. Many of the larger employers, BHA, for example, the Jockey Club, do cover your membership costs to Women in Racing, so you can claim that back mostly through expenses. Annual membership is £25 or concessions is 15, whether you're a NARS member, if you work for a racing charity or an education institution, or live outside the UK, or are 24 years old and younger. So Sophie is kindly going to take over and talk about the mentoring programme.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Sophie Watmuff. Can I just say, it's just fascinating hearing from Sue Anstiss. Thank you very much for joining us, Sue. I absolutely loved the documentary, and perhaps we can organise a female jockey to go on the Game Changers podcast, because loving that podcast as well. But back to the AGM, and I will run us through the mentoring programme. So the Women in Racing mentoring programme. Next slide, please, Lucy. Sorry, we're going to have to do these quick slide commands. So this is the only official mentoring program established in racing and a key objective of Women in Racing. It's a platform designed to connect those willing to give their time to mentor others from the mentor with those looking to be mentored, i.e. the mentee. We currently have 28 mentors based nationwide with experience from all facets of the industry. And our objective is to provide members with tailored support, encouragement, guidance and contacts to ensure that talented people within our industry can continue to develop. We are delighted to have supported over 100 mentoring partnerships since inception. We celebrated the 10th year of the programme last year, and I had a lovely long list on my slide of the 28 fantastic women working in the industry. There we go. Perfect, thank you. Working in the industry that we hugely appreciate, giving up their time to support our members, and a big thank you to every one of them. This programme wouldn't happen without you all. So we might skip on a few slides there.
Sorry, Sophie, my tech is just not playing ball today.
It's okay, we could go on with that.
Get rid of it and start it again.
Yeah, cool. I don't need it for my bit, but yeah, we just had a couple of quotes from mentees that you know had really benefited from starting the mentoring, from starting a mentoring partnership through the programme. And one of them I thought was really insightful, that said, it was fantastic to be able to ask someone all these sorts of things without feeling silly, if that makes sense. And for me, having been through the program, that makes complete sense. You know, it's such a unique opportunity for the mentee to discuss their development, and knowing that time you have scheduled in is dedicated to that, that's what you were there to do. So that in itself can really provide a lot of confidence and direction. So if this is something that you feel that you might be interested in, please get involved. The door is always open. New mentees are always welcome to join the programme. Mentoring is a free benefit as part of your membership, and a full list of the mentors on the programme are on the website. So please visit the Women in Racing website. If we can, there is a screenshot that I've put on that just shows, that's it. That's a screenshot of our website. So if you're a member, or if you're looking to become a member, log into your account on the Women in Racing website and you'll find this page, and just hit the apply button, and that will there's a short form to fill out, and that will come directly to me confidentially, and then I'll give you a call back and we can discuss further. But that's it for the mentoring programme.
So hopefully Emma is able to talk through the bursary programme.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. So firstly, I just want to reiterate exactly what Sophie has just said. You know, it's great to be such a part of such a great cause. So my name's Emma Sayer, and recently joined the Women in Racing Committee. And I, along with others, oversee the bursary scheme. So Lucy, if you don't mind just going on to the next slide. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what the bursary scheme offers and means. So if you are a member of Women in Racing, you are entitled to apply for a bursary of up to £2,000. And this £2,000 is there to develop personal growth or development for all of our members. Currently, we have awarded 14 bursaries totaling over £15,000. We aim to approve up to two applications per year, and we currently are in the process of reviewing 2 current applications. There's a great range and scope of previous awards, whether it's from personal development courses, from media and film to presenting, whether it's skills or whether it's development. There's no kind of clause on what it has to fit into, but there we just give a bit of an overview of the previous applications that have been put in. So in terms of how you go about applying, so same for applying for a mentorship, it's on the Women in Racing website, and in the bottom you can see where you would click apply now. It takes you through a relatively straightforward form. Once the form has then been submitted, myself along with other committee members will review your application and invite you to attend a relatively brief online discussion. This is just to give us a chance to ask any questions that we might have regarding your application, or to understand a little bit more about how it's going to provide support for your future development. The only other thing to consider is we do ask that anybody that is successful in a bursary, that we do ask how you might give back to the Women in Racing team. So whether that be updating us on any progress reports, career development, or maybe even a Q&A session. So I think we're now going to hand back over to Sophie to discuss events.
Sure, Thank you, Emma. Yeah, so a few of the events we've had so far this year. We attended the British Racing School in January to join a short version of their management training course. So this provided training on personal and career development to build confidence and self-awareness, and a great networking opportunity to kick off the year. So thank you to the team at the BRS for hosting this event, and one we really hope to repeat next year. Next up was a new event series for 2023, and one as a committee we are all really particularly proud of and excited to see to come to fruition, is the introduction to women in racing evenings. So our idea that we had at the end of the last year was to take women in racing on tour and visit the training hubs across the country to provide a free evening event for women working in all roles within horse racing, but a real focus on racing and stud staff. So these are free evening events after evening stables in a known kind of relaxed setting, a free glass of bubbly for good measure, where we can showcase the benefits of women in racing and how the mentoring program, the bursary and racing home is able to help. So we headed to the Racing Centre in Newmarket in January, most recently attended Oaksey House in Lambourne, and we have plans to visit Jackberry House in Malton in kind of September, early October, I think we're looking at for that one. So an event series we hope to grow and continue into 2024. Another free, but this time online event we held this year was on International Women's Day, so kindly hosted by Dina Merson. We had a fantastic panel for this one, and 45 minutes we had scheduled definitely wasn't long enough. We could have been there all day discussing our topic on the role of mentoring in helping horse racing innovate over the next 10 years. So some really interesting insights from our panel, both working within and outside the industry, and great to offer an accessible online event for all to celebrate International Women's Day. Then in April, we headed back up to Liverpool for an in-person event, this time at the Grand Women's Summit, now in its 8th year, and a fantastic event that we continue to host with Aintree Racecourse. A huge thank you to the Jockey Club for their continued support with this event, where we had a discussion panel of special guests and a course walk with Katie Walsh and Nina Carberry. And then a few exciting events lined up for the rest of 2023. We are really excited to visit Lamwade Stud in Newmarket in August, followed by evening racing at Newmarket Racecourse. Details of this event will be sent out and put on the website in the next few days. And then we will be heading to Burley Horse Trials in September, the introduction to women in racing event at Malton in early October, and then finishing the year at Tattersalls for the Christmas party. So all information for these events will be added to the events page of the website. So stay tuned, and we hope to see you at an event soon. Now passing on to Flora to go over the social media.
Hello, I'm very new to the team, but thank you so much for the opportunity. It's really exciting to be a part of Women in Racing. I've always been a fan and followed from afar, so now to be actively involved is a really amazing opportunity, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So thank you to the whole team. I will be taking over the social from Olivia. Apologies, I am quite new. So I'll take you through it as much as I know and from what Olivia's passed on to me. So effectively, we're trying to build on the sense of community. In terms of our overall social engagement, it's really strong, and I think the main aim would be to develop that further. So our Facebook at the moment is approaching 2,500 followers, and at the moment, our Instagram seems to be the most engaging, putting up lots of stories and posts. And I think looking forward, our approach would be, again, to increase volume, generate engagement and celebrate our achievements. I think going forward, it'd be nice to have future plans in terms of Instagram takeovers. We've been doing a fair bit of that already, but I think collaborating with new talent and people of interest would be great in terms of cross-pollinating content and finding out some stories from people in and around the racing community. We also have our Facebook Women in Racing social group, as I've mentioned, Instagram takeovers, and our Women in Racing members directory. So again, that will hopefully boost our sense of community and engagement. Our overall strategy ties in with the overarching strategy with Women in Racing. So as mentioned, our plan will be to develop that further and aligning with various projects we mentioned earlier in the presentation, which will be in turn with our social output and content. So again, hopefully we can broaden that and give further insight into all aspects of women in racing and the community that we hold. I should also mention, which I almost forgot, that we have also TikTok now. So that was launched earlier this year. It was created initially for Racing Home, but it'd be great to broaden that strategy and generate further content around that as well.
Thanks so much, Flora. Good job for 1 weekend into the job. Okay, so the financial update and partnerships are, Sally was going to join us and talk about those, but Sally is in the middle of organising National Racehorse Week, and something urgent has come up, so I will take the reins for now. So in terms of memberships, the 2022-2023 year, 1,570 through our partnerships and through our Racing Foundation grant in that year, 90,000, which I'll explain because that links very much into Racing Home, which is the parenthood program I mentioned earlier. And the major costs of that in that financial year was £94,197.88, funded by that grant from the Racing Foundation. So yeah, excess of income over expenditure in this financial year, that should be the other way around, £5,390. Balance of funds at 30th of April 2023 is 19,771. And while those look a little bit not the best figures, there was a conscious decision not only this year to continue investing in the Racing Home programme, but those events that Sophie mentioned, the Introduction to Women in Racing events, which we hosted completely free of charge to members, non-members, anyone that was interested in finding out more about what we do. And so the investment that went with hosting those events, even though we kept them relatively low-key and at racing venues, just meant that kind of we slightly tipped the balance of earning versus spending to make sure that those worked. But each of those events did result in a significant uplift in memberships, mentoring applications, and also bursary applications. So for us, that's a real positive. And while there were no bursaries awarded in that financial year, we, as Emma said earlier, we have 2 pending. So our events raised £340 towards the bursary programme. So further fundraising events and partnerships are in progress. So we have an official partners programme. So for anyone who is interested in supporting women in racing or becoming a partner, current partners include the Jockey Club and the All in Diversity group, who support us in a number of ways, whether that's through events or financial support. And yeah, the official kind of partner program, the details are below, but do get in touch with me directly if that's something that an organisation is interested in, and I'd be happy to kind of talk through that in much more detail. So Racing Home, Dom is going to join us to talk through elements of Racing Home, and also got a video to play you. Hopefully Dom is.
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
She's there.
Did you want to do the video first, Lucy? Or
Yeah, shall I? It's a good way to kick it off, isn't it? Okay. Hopefully you can hear it, but shout if you can't hear it through your speakers.
As a mother, a working mother who was striving to return to a career that I loved, I felt so alone. I felt very alone.
Prior to my being pregnant, I never could envisage how I could make my role work and how I could work within the industry, therefore, if I had a child.
I found returning physically difficult. I was heavy, I hadn't ridden for a year, and nobody would even entertain employing me. It's game-changing for the industry. No woman who chooses to have a child in racing will ever be alone or feel alone or unsupported again, because Racing Home exists now, and that's the beauty of this programme.
Racing Home provides a portal, one-stop shop website that covers all rights and entitlements, both from an employer and employee perspective. It also introduces the podcast series, which is 12 podcasts with key stakeholders, all openly speaking candidly about their experiences of the industry. We've also got an education piece coming, which will include modules around individuals industry-wide educating themselves on the challenges and the issues themselves and colleagues face. If you look at new entrants, for example, we're getting close to now 70% of new entrants being female. If you're looking at parenting and particularly maybe mothers, I think we've got to sort of make consideration to them numbers and the importance of making sure they're kind of looked after. We would like everybody within the industry to be utilising the portal, again leading to hopefully better retention of staff. We all know it's a challenge, but with the use of the portal and engaging in the best practices and the examples of best practice on the portal to make a better industry.
So Racing Home also provides a physical rehabilitation programme which consists of 6 or, if required, more sessions of physiotherapy, because we know that there's obviously significant changes that happen to women during pregnancy from a physiological point of view, and we want them to return to sport, but it's always been very, very hard, and a lot of women drop out of sport following having a baby because they're just not given that support. If we don't provide that support, they will, just from a physical point of view, find it really difficult to return. 1 in 4 women will have trouble with pelvic floor problems as a result of having a baby, and if we don't give them the right treatment following having a baby, and ideally slightly before they have a baby, then they will continue to have problems and they will get worse, and they just won't be able to perform their job to the best of their ability.
I feel Racing Home would have helped more in that I would have known my rights, but it also would have reassured my employer as to what they needed to do. They had never had anybody that was pregnant work for them before at the stud, so it was quite a scramble to try and find information, and it is available out there, but Racing Home has just brought it all into one place, and it's more tailored to the industry.
It's starting a conversation that hasn't been had before. It's opening doors for not only employees but employers, because ultimately if you have a lady who returns from maternity leave who's now physically fit as soon as she returns, that's a bonus to you as an employer. For too long, I think women have chosen to either shut up or put up and have just left the industry because it wasn't worth having those conversations. My hope is that now that Racing Home exists and there is a support network of women who are championing women who choose to be mothers, that those conversations will be far easier in the future.
Dom, over to you.
okay, hi everybody. Sorry, you just heard me talking and waffling on in the video, but so basically Racing Home came about from a series of, well, it was during COVID. It was supposed to be a series of conversations that were had all around the country from women working in different roles in the industry, and it was to try to draw a picture of what were the challenges that women were facing. Well, not just women, but men as well, but ultimately women, as you know, we are the ones who are pregnant throughout, we have to take maternity leave, and so it's far more complicated for women when the sport that they're working in isn't inclusive to their needs as pregnant women or mothers thereafter. So it began by having a number of conversations, and it was very clear from the beginning that actually there was a real need for something like this to be put in place, to start those conversations, to support women who didn't want to have to sacrifice their career in racing because they'd chosen to become mothers. And my role at NARS, where I was previous to the role that I'm in now, it was very clear that also we are losing a lot of women who are choosing to have children, especially in the grassroots of racing. So as you can see, and as Michael said in the video so eloquently, we put together a post-pregnancy rehabilitation support pilot program. So we've just completed the pilot of that over the last year. I mean, this is 4 years worth of work now. So, you know, we really are dedicated to the cause and to, you know, changing the industry for women who would like to have children and maintain a career. And what it does is it offers ladies 6 free sessions of physiotherapy tailored towards postpartum needs, and, you know, looking to return to work and whatever that might look like. And as you'll imagine, you know, many different ladies in the industry are doing different jobs, but the most challenging jobs physically obviously are the grassroots jobs in racing yards and studs. So that's where that really, you know, comes into play. Ultimately, as a mother of 2 who worked in grassroots racing, there was nothing like this for me. I wish there had have been. It definitely would have made my journey a lot easier. So it's meaning that women have the opportunity and the chance now to return to their job from maternity leave and, you know, be ready to work. My experience, and many other ladies that we've spoken to's experience, was, oh great, you're back from maternity leave, here's 3 lots, off you pop, you know, and that's, it's just not viable. It's not viable. Your body's changed so much throughout pregnancy and childbirth, and, you know, in the postpartum period as well. So it's enabling those women to actually take control of their return to work, which is, it's, as I say in the video, it's game changing, and it's going to make such a huge difference for women who are working in racing. We also put together a series of podcasts, which you can find on Spotify, YouTube, I believe. There's links to them on the Women in Racing website, the Racing Home website, or the portal, which it's a great insight to lots of different women working in lots of different roles, their experiences, their opinions, you know, their advice. It's really, really great series of podcasts, really interesting and incredibly helpful. There's just a selection of them on the screen for you there. So yeah, thank you, Lucy. And obviously, as Michael says in the video, the portal, which ultimately is a one-stop shop for people who are looking for advice on maternity, as I mentioned earlier, paternity, you know, your rights as a parent in working in the industry, in whatever role and whatever that looks like. So it's actually, it's a very broad piece of work, and it's offering women all the support ultimately that they need through their pregnancy, through their maternity, and then out the other side at postpartum. So it's huge and it's exciting, and, you know, the team at Simply Racing have done an absolutely incredible job. It's fantastic. So we just have managed to, well, we've been granted our 2nd year of funding for the programme. So the pilot that we've just ran, we've had 12 ladies through the physiotherapy now, which is absolutely incredible. So that's very exciting. We're looking forward to hearing their feedback and their experience from the programme. And hopefully the next year we will be able to facilitate another 20 ladies who'll be able to take part in the programme. This is absolutely at no cost to the participant, and that's the beauty of this as well, is that it's, you know, industry funding, and it's getting that recognition that actually we do have an issue in the industry where we are not making it possible for women to have a smooth return to work, and ultimately the industry as a whole is paying the price because women are leaving after having had children. They're not coming back to grassroots. So with the second year, we have a lot more planned. We're going to continue with the podcasts, hopefully a couple more videos. Hopefully I won't be in them to bore you this time. So yeah, it's incredibly exciting, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support and the funding from Kindred Group, Racing Foundation, Racing Welfare, who've assisted with the physiotherapy element, IJF. So it's a big effort from a lot of parties, but absolutely brilliant that the industry is recognising how important this work is. I don't think there's anything else, Lucy.
Thanks, Dom. No, that was brilliant. And that's another section that we could host an entire webinar on, and we probably will again soon. So do keep tabs on that, whether it's via the podcast, whether it's via racinghome.org.uk. That's where you can get all your advice and guidance from on relating to whether it's your rights and entitlements, or contacting the Racing Home team directly. There is also a lot of work going on slightly more behind the scenes around building a data picture of what parenthood looks like in the industry, and that all comes off the back of the original research piece, which we're extremely proud of, and also very grateful to Kate Clayton-Hathaway from Oxford Brookes for putting that all together, and we continue to work with Kate. Final few thank yous on Racing Home for their support over the past year. Simply Racing, who deliver the programme. We could not do it without Dina, Dana, Michael, the full team that are involved in that, and our funders, the Racing Foundation. Again, a huge vote of confidence from them that we've got funding for the next year, and Kindred Group, part of the Unimet brand, who have supported us in a number of ways over the past year, and hopefully will be supporting us again into the coming year. So yeah, big piece of work there, and yeah, lots of thank yous to everyone involved. Has anyone got any questions on the AGM before we move on to the Q&A with Emma Hamilton and Jo Mason? No, looks nice and quiet. That's hoping that means we've answered them all. Okay, so in that case, I'm just going to promote Emma to a panelist very quickly, and also welcome Jo as well. Hopefully you are both able to, oh yeah, we've got Jo, brilliant. And hopefully, Emma, you are able to switch your video on now. Yep, here she is.
Hi.
Okay, so the idea behind this Q&A was just to hear more about Emma's fascinating piece of research and hear a little bit from Jo about her career, but also her involvement in the research. And Jo's had a pretty serious injury, which I've been following the photos of the bruising on Instagram pretty closely. So yeah, it's just a great opportunity to hear from women doing amazing things in the sport. So you don't need to hear much more from me. I will hand over to Emma first. Hopefully you can introduce yourself, your background, and of course the research project.
Hi, yeah, so obviously my name is Emma Hamilton. I'm currently studying a PhD at Liverpool John Moores. My background is horse racing. I grew up in a horse racing family with my mum as a trainer, and my older sister used to race ride as well. And then I just competed as a point-to-point jockey for a number of years and retired very young once I figured out I could go down this route, and I've very much enjoyed it since. So my current research at the moment, we're looking at a kind of a big question and that is using past and present data to identify and develop key physical and health characteristics of modern day male and female jockey athletes. So it's quite a broad question. However, it's slowly worked its way down now into a very female specific topic, which has been great, as we've brought on a very specific female researcher who's one of my main supervisors, Professor Kirsty Elliott-Sale. He's at Manchester Met, so it's been great. We've kind of worked our way down that. So we asked like a broad question on both the men and the women, and then we've kind of been able to start building this female jockey story as we've gone along, which has been great. So yeah, do you want me to talk through the project? I can leave it there because I'm sure I might bring up, but yeah.
Do you think we'll cover it in questions in a minute, or do you want to give a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I can. Basically, I'll break it down. Like we had 4 projects. We're now down to 2, but the second one has become so big. So the first one was a survey and an interview, and we had like 84 responses from this survey, and that was both to the men and the women. And we asked them, you know, where did you come from, like your background into racing, what was your racing career like, what injuries have you sustained through your career, you know, do you smoke, you know, just to see what the habits are like of jockeys, and what attributes they think lead to success. And then we can also align those attributes. So if we see common factors, we can say that could be associated with a success rate. And then from there, we basically asked them if they could do an interview. We then conducted 17 interviews for 1 hour on each jockey. I think 4 of them were female, 1 from each category that we had at the time. And within that, we could ask them more in-depth questions. We asked everybody these questions. So the only thing that we would ask females that was different to the men was we asked them about their menstrual cycle, their menstrual health, if, you know, when did they start their periods, their contraceptives they currently use, how they feel within the racing industry, stuff like that. So we just indulged a bit further from what the men would have. But overall, we asked them very similar questions just to get a generic idea of where they've come from. This kind of led into, okay, we've got some very different stories from the men and the women. Like the women tend to have a very similar story and a background. So we were like, well, let's ask the question that no one has asked before. And let's actually get a sort of physiological aspect, like what does a female jockey look like in a physiological view? So actually more internal. So we can ask them all the biopsychosocial aspects, but let's go down the physiological side. And that's when we started by taking a menstrual cycle health and knowledge and the use of contraceptive audit, which is quite normal in a lot of sports. It's a really nice base to start on. I know they've used it in football and rugby and things like that, to ask the girls, you know, what do you use contraceptive wise, what's your menstrual health like, and what's your knowledge on the menstrual cycle, and what's your knowledge on contraceptives, so we can get a better understanding about the knowledge that, you know, these athletes have on what they're doing to their body or what they should be watching for and things like that. And this can be fed back both obviously to the industry, but also kind of to the broader world, that there is a lack of knowledge in this area, just generally through education. And it's nothing against what sport you play. I think it's general education. And then we then bring them into a lab-based study, which we're currently doing now. And we've just got everything ready to go. We just need to get the girls in. And that is basically, we cover everything from collecting their resting metabolic rate, their DEXAs, their basic, which covers their percentage of body fat, muscle mass, bone mineral density, do their VO2s, we're doing bloods collections for hormone levels, we're doing DLWs, which is doubly labeled water, so we can see calories out per day through a urine sample. We're doing force plate work, and we're doing hydration tests. So we'll get this really overall great image of what a female jockey looks like and what they're general, like you get these sort of norms, and we can hopefully kind of create what a picture is of what they are before we start asking him more and more questions. So yeah, that's kind of the overview. So yeah.
Thanks, Emma. I appreciate it's so much work that it's difficult to fit that into a succinct explanation, but I think you managed pretty well. Jo, would you mind introducing yourself? Maybe give us a bit of an overview of your career to date, maybe a career highlight so far?
Yeah, of course. My name is Joanna Mason and I'm a professional flat jockey. Born and bred into racing. My granddad trains, and now obviously in partnership with my uncle as well. My mum used to ride pointing. So actually I grew up in the pointing scene, really, a bit the same as Emma. So I actually pointed for probably a good 10 years, if not more. I must have ridden about 48 point winners. And in 2016, I actually broke my back. So I did my T8 and T9, and it was a compression fracture and it was unstable. So I was on my back for, I think, 5 days before they could operate. And then 8 pins and 2 rods later, I was up and about. And, thanks to the Jack Berry House, I think it had literally just opened and I was one of the first ones in. 3 months and a week, and I was back race riding on the flat. And because the metalwork was in the rigid part of my back, I was able to do that without having to have it removed. And so then, after that, I decided to maybe stop the pointing and stick to the flat, but again, only riding as an amateur. So doing a lot of work in the yard. I was riding out every day, doing quite a bit of traveling, and obviously riding in the amateur races. And then COVID happened, and it was one of those things, amateurs couldn't ride. And I'd thought about it a lot of years, especially after breaking my back, to whether I'd turn then. And, it's definitely a lot more of a complicated process because, it was a big step for me to, change professional from being an amateur. And again, there was, back when I did break my back in 2016, there wasn't many females, making their name. Yeah, we had Hayley and Kirsty Milserac, but really we were kind of the very small fish in a very big pond. So I actually just decided to stay as an amateur and carry on riding for a number of years as an amateur. And then obviously due to COVID and amateurs not being able to ride, that kind of pushed me in the bit of the right direction to think, what, let's do it. And Serena again said you'd be stupid not to. Technically I still had my £5 claim, having ridden I think it was about 38 winners under rules. So I had a £5 claim, and back then you had a £6 allowance as well as having my £5 claim and still being able to ride in apprentice races. So that was very good for me, and something I've never looked back on. Yeah, it was a hard decision for me, really, because I'd got to the age where, as you would normally be a professional, you would do it, turn apprentice at 16 and work your way through that way. And I've gone through the amateur ranks and turned at the age of 30. Obviously, I was lucky that I've had the experience and chances and ridden in a lot of races. So, turning was a bit of an easier process. It's not like I turned 30 and just decided to ride. So yeah, that was a hard choice as well, because I think after the age of 25 or 26 now, that you're unable to turn back once you've turned. So it was that big leap for me and a bit of self-confidence that I kind of needed, really, to say, right, I'm going to give this a chance. My big worry was, would I get more rides as I would as an amateur? And if I didn't, to not be able to race ride again. That was my hard thing. But, I've gone with it and I've not looked back since. And, I've had amazing, coming up to 3 seasons, really. Nothing I could have wished for, really. Last year I think I was maybe one of the top 3 females, behind Holly and Hayley there, and I've not looked back. So I've had some amazing wins. I think maybe one of my highlights would have probably been riding a horse of my granddad's called Yorkshire Lady in a listed race in France, and I actually had a really nice big winner for Charlie Johnson. It was actually second winner as a trainer, and it was an 80 grand all-weather finals handicap down at Lingfield on a horse called Ponsalius. So that was also a very big win for me. So yeah, it's not easy as a female, but the barriers have definitely a lot less now, especially with the likes of Holly Doyle doing amazing stuff that she's doing, which definitely makes it a little bit easier on our front. But yeah, no, I had 3 amazing seasons, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I wish I'd have done it sooner, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank goodness you did turn professional, because you've been on fire ever since, pretty much, haven't you? Okay, so I've just got a few questions to give to you both, conscious that we haven't got that long till we said we'd wrap up. Emma, what inspired you to take on your PhD research project?
So I did a lot of background in sports science, I guess. And so I guess it's my background, that's such really hard, like it's my background and the lack of what there is. So when I was 16, I'm a control freak. I'm going to put that out there now. I will sit there for hours and try and control every variable I've got. And I've always been very sporty. And so when I was 16, I was Googling, what do jockeys eat? What do jockeys do in the gym? And I couldn't find anything unless it was a rare article on like AP McCoy being like, oh yeah, I eat like 3 jelly beans a day and I sit in a bath. And I was like, no, that's not for me. I like food, but how do I juggle it? And I then would have falls racing and I would just break, and I got really frustrated. And at the time, my dad pushed me, when I tried to drop out of school, my dad pushed me to do sport and exercise science at college. And that kind of steered the route that you could ask those questions, and that something wasn't quite right. And this is, I think, just before the IGF, as it was really just coming in, which was great. And the research aspect was just starting to come through as well. And I just fell in love with the idea that I could answer the questions. So I'm watching Joe get attacked by a cat. And so yeah, I just wanted to like answer those questions. And when I finished my degrees, I did my undergraduate and I went to do a internship at Oxford University with the jockey study group there. And that was on bone mineral density at the time. And we could see a variation in the women and the men then. And I spoke to George Wilson, the Dr. George Wilson up at LJMU, who was obviously now one of my supervisors. And I was very keen just to stay in that field, just because it's a love of mine is horse racing. And as much as there's a lot of problems in horse racing, like I don't want to just stand there and just say, oh, it's bad. I want to help it improve. So if I can, I want to be part of that movement. And I was really lucky, just at the end of lockdown, I was looking to apply for PhDs, and they advertised for one, saying that they wanted it down the female route, and it was all in strength and conditioning and things like this, and looking at sports performance. And when you apply for PhDs, you have to find something, I guess, that makes you like goes, that's me. Everything about that is me. And I think, yeah, honestly, I think that just inspired me. It was like, I just want to get out there and basically help where I can. Do we know what it is yet that needs help? No. But if I could be the first, like a step in that direction, then that's amazing. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And yeah, and just the lack of research on female jockeys at the time still is very obvious, and it just needed to be done. And to also have, I think, a female studying female jockeys is really important. When I was at a conference the other day, they spoke about actually a lot of male researchers study females, and actually it's quite a small area for females to actually study the female area. So to be a female jockey, obviously not to the way Joe is, but to be to have that experience, I know where they come from, I know what they say, I understand the weighing room cultures, I understand everything. So I think I just kind of wanted to be there for the girls, but also the racing industry to go forward in that direction.
Thank you. And Joe, I know you're being attacked by a kitten, but
attention, these little kittens. Sorry.
How does it feel as a jockey to have someone like Emma working to kind of support those advances in female jockey performance? It must be nice kind of knowing that there's someone there working to help you improve your life as a jockey, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously that I didn't add, I actually did an undergrad degree, and then I did a master's in sports nutrition, and I did about what jockeys ate, and again, like Emma, found absolutely nothing. And I know when I ended up doing my master's, I actually ended up having to compare different weight loss sports, because there was nothing about jockeys. And I know there is probably more research coming out, and I know Danny at the Jackberry House has done things about the physiological training and markers and stuff. So there's definitely more coming out about jockeys, which is good to see. But definitely on the female front really as well. I think my sister raves about a book called Raw, I think is it, about, you know, training at the right time of your cycle and doing that sort of stuff. I haven't read it yet. I'm not the biggest reader, but that is on my list to do. So yeah, it is interesting, and definitely some really interesting information will come from it.
And from your knowledge of the weighing room, do you think others are kind of open-minded and keen to get hold of this kind of research and understand how they can, you know, use it to benefit them?
I suppose really nothing's really been said as much about it. So I think, again, Emma's just kind of raising awareness for, you know, the girls to be involved and probably find out more.
Yeah, of course. And Emma, so in terms of timelines, you're obviously, a lot of work's already been done. It sounds like there's a lot still to come. What kind of, when are you aiming to have, I know PhDs take forever, but what's the plan?
So we're hoping to have this data collected by October this year, because that's when my PhD funding runs out. So I'd like to have that done. And then I will sit and write up. That's obviously part of the PhD. I need to do a year of thesis writing. But I am currently writing up 2 papers at the moment, and that's from the first data collection we collected, and that was on the questionnaires and surveys. The first, we're going to potentially, it's been back and forth about how we publish this data, because it's a lot of qualitative. So it's about opinion and my perception on the female jockey opinion. And so it's quite hard, because obviously you don't want to get it wrong. So I'm trying to basically write an article on their story of the interviews that we've taken. And it's not so much like a story of like bad things that happen. It's just about where do they come from, and just writing it in its own section. So we can then progress lovely into this sort of review on the audit. So we've got the audit paper that should also come out separately to the lab-based research we're doing, and that would be the audit on obviously the contraceptive use and the menstrual cycle health, because a lot of female jockeys we found do actually use a lot of contraceptives. So for them, it's just kind of relaying that off, so we know what on average a female jockey would use, and how that could affect hormonal density and menstrual cycle and things like that. So it's good. Hopefully we'll have it all fit together, and then there's a lot more research that needs to be done. We've just covered the base, and I don't know what's going to happen from there. They might do another project, or hopefully maybe get some funding and continue, but it just completely depends what comes out of our research data, like our collection. So what we see from that, and then what we want to ask from that point on as well.
Of course. And I guess you'll be feeding your findings back into all the various different research that's already been done, and all of the organisations that need to see it. I'm guessing Inter Jockeys Fund, all those kind of BHA as needed. Is that part of your plan?
Yeah, no, because we obviously are supported by the Racing Foundation. So they've obviously asked for these reports. So that goes back to the industry, which is great. And it's really nice to produce work that you know is being fed back. It's also really great because what we're trying to prevent generally in a lot of sports science is that we're training women like little men, and we're not training them the way they should be. And like Sue mentioned earlier about how she said that there's a possibility that women could be better than men. That is very true, because women do carry less body weight. We can actually start training a lot younger than men can as well, in the gym and things like that. So, and we know our general weight before we start racing, before men do. So we could be way more prepared than men do, men can be, before we even start our careers. And then from that point on, we can train women more effectively to prevent injuries, to actually get a decent performance, to eat effectively so they're not starving themselves. Whereas men will have to do all these techniques to try and reduce body weight all the time through their career, which reduces performance output. Whereas women, if we can prevent them from doing that, there is actually a higher chance that they can have a better success rate. Because realistically, when you are on a horse, it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman, but if you can control the variables and become better, and then you're not having to worry about starving yourself, and that your concentration and reaction times are reduced. You've got everything, you're really hydrated, you're well fueled, you're going to have a better ride. So it's just about being able to kind of get that back to the industry, and then obviously feed that back to the Inter Jockeys Fund, because obviously that's where most of the strength and conditioning staff are. with the rehabilitation centres and stuff, with rehab staff. So they'll be able to obviously actually put it into practice and see if it works, which would be great as well.
That's great, thank you. And I am conscious we're over time, but I've got one more question for Jo. Jo, can you just tell us about your injury recently? Because it did look pretty significant. And tell us about kind of the rehab process, when you're hoping to be back on a race course, all that kind of thing. I know you've had lots of help also from the IJF.
Yeah, exactly. So it was 5 weeks ago, on the Monday, we just had a horse coming back into cantering really. Again, it could go into this, but horses with hormones, she was coming into season in one ovary, so the vets have had to inject her. Just, she was just being a madam. So they'd given her a bit of time off, and they just wanted her riding back again, just to see, if she had come out of season, etc. And everything actually was going to plan. And then 3 pigeons flew out of the hedge, and she just went from underneath me, and I've just obviously landed a little bit funny on the gallop. Thought I was fine, if I'm honest. Got up, kind of hobbled a bit back down the gallop, and then my granddad ended up picking me up. And then, I had 4 really good rides, and knew one of them would be a winner, which it did end up being. And, I had to step down from my rides that day, not kind of knowing what I'd done. I then went to the Jack Berry house, got some ice on it, and was recommended really probably that I should go for an x-ray just to make sure and rule everything out. But thinking, I've probably just, gone over on my ankle, I'm probably fine. And when the results came back that I'd had a spiral fracture of my distal fibula, so right at the bottom, where your leg kind of goes into your ankle. So yeah, I'd done a proper good job of it. So yeah, I've been, I think really, apart from weekends, I've been in the Jack Berry house every single day, especially for the first 2 weeks. I was in there 3 times a day, going on the game ready ice compression machine, just to help with the swelling. And then in the last 2 weeks, I've started stepping up, doing a lot more in the hydrotherapy pool, because obviously it holds your weight, so it's not as much pressure on the joints and say the bones. And then I'm doing a lot more in the gym now with Danny, and like kind of loading that and getting there. So yeah, I can still feel it a bit, but it is getting better day by day. And yeah, hopefully I'll be back on a racetrack soon. They might tell me different. I'm hoping the end of the month. I'll go back into the Jack Berry house and they'll tell me, Joanna, you're being too hopeful. But I'm one of those, I wanted to be back racing yesterday, not in time. But obviously things take time, and a break's a break in the end. They say 4 to 6 weeks really, and I'm only on 5.5 weeks now. So it's definitely getting the stability and mobility back in my ankle, which the Jack Berry house have been absolute lifesavers. So I just keep thinking back, if it wasn't really for the IDF and the Jack Berry house, I just don't know how long it would take me to get back to race riding. And that's the thing you miss, and you do it every day, and you live it and you breathe it, and it's just what you want to get back to. So you do as much as you can and as quick as you can to get back to do that.
That's great to hear that you're healing well. And yeah, best of luck with that return to riding. I'm sure you'll beat all the experts in getting back. And Emma as well, thanks so much, and best of luck with the rest of your PhD. Looking forward to hearing kind of how that's going as it goes on. I know it's so much work. So yeah, that brings to a close our AGM. Thank you again to Sue for introducing it. Thanks to our brilliant committee, and to Jo and Emma for tuning in as well for the Q&A. We'll be sending out a recording later or tomorrow, and lots of links to Sue's work and a survey as well, so that you can feed back to us what it is you want to hear from in future, and different kinds of events that you're looking for. So thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, see you all soon, hopefully.